we can recognize that. Why? Because the British Empire, which took over, crumbled, and fell apart. In World War I, when the British was taking over part of what's now Palestine, General Allenby went to the tomb of Salahuddin Ayyub and kicked it, and you know what? 800 years later, he says, Salahuddin, we're back. That's the kind of memory that European got. Anyway, so don't take past history and modern history as separate from each other. Okay, let me get back to school days. Believe it or not, Sister Bahia's husband in the past was a bedwetter. And she couldn't figure it out. She thought it was something wrong with her. Why would I get up in the middle of the night and there's, being woke up with a grown man, So I was just talking in a conversation, and so I got up to use the restroom one night, and so we got into discussion about, well, why would you get up and urinate, I said, my past husband, he would urinate on me, in the bed. I said, well, I said, the body has a mechanism where you can't urinate on yourself. I said, because when your penis is hard, you can't urinate. So no matter what you're doing, that mechanism 95% of the time is going to work, right?
Right.
And you're going to get up because all of this is part of the autonomic nervous system, I think the white folks call it. It's like digestion and all that stuff. It just works automatically. Well, that's the same thing, the psychosomatic connection between the mind and the body. My bladder is filling up, therefore my penis is going to get hard and I can't urinate. And I said, so you must have had, sex must not have been that serious. And she said, no, it wasn't. I said, that's the reason. I said, because he couldn't get that hard, that's why he peed the bed. She was shocked. I said, it's simple. Everybody, you can figure that out. A doctor don't need to, any doctor that couldn't tell you that was a problem, or if he couldn't figure it out, I don't know what was wrong with him. That's probably why he still peed the bed, because he couldn't think. Probably being in the army made him crazy, No, that's all it was, right? And then if it's gonna happen like that, then you would learn how to, well, it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm not gonna drink anything, right, from now on, because I'm gonna go to bed at 10 o'clock and use the restroom. I won't have no liquid in me, so I won't be needing to, that's ways of controlling yourself. If you have certain things, you can control it. I'll fill up with water all morning and drinks all morning, and then get down to where I'm going to bed, I won't have nothing for 4 or 5 hours. That way, there's nothing in me. You know what I mean? Simple as that. Okay. Anyway, all the people in Oakland had that school days look to, and they took it serious. Oh my goodness, did they take it serious. They took body language, they took Okay, if I have round features, smart people are what? They're lighter, they have more pointed features. They look more white. That's all. So they associated, when they looked at me, they saw me like that. Okay, now, there's a difference between school days and being raised in jail. In jail, they have a different, they're not too much on light and dark, you know what I mean? It's whether you're tough and stuff like that, you know, what gang you belong to, all of that. And so you're being raised by men, so it ain't no, ooh, he's cute and got good hair. In fact, in prison, that might be a liability.
Right.
You know what I mean? A little light-skinned guy with curly, wavy hair, that might be a liability. You know what I mean? But being a big, dark hair on the chest Negro, that's fine. Okay, so I had one of the nicest things happen to me, and I wanted to pay them people back, and I couldn't. I think I mentioned it before. My mother's friends were older. They were all in their 50s when I was coming up, because I was the last one born, so my mother was almost 40 when I was born, and my father was even older than that. So my mother's friends, they're all from the South, and I don't know, I was even a little darker then. So they used to say to me and to my mother, Ethel, he's a pretty little old black thing. That's exactly what they all said. Now, they wasn't in their 20s. They wasn't in their 30s where they judge. Now they're older and more mature. And they know now, them wavy-headed people and all of that, you know, they have certain characteristics. And they knew that the stable, he may marry a woman after one of the pretty boys then got her pregnant or something. You know what I mean? That was common. You know? But there were people, the people that looked like me, that's what they did. They didn't count as nothing wrong with that. That's nothing wrong. You know, because they would encounter the wavy-headed people, and they get pregnant, and then they would find out that that was not what they thought manhood was. Now, the people, when I was coming up, had grown through that. They were all from the South. And they would tell me, Ethel, he's a pretty little black thing. So I grew up, I didn't have to have any classes in Black is Beautiful. Because those women who were in their 50s on up had brainwashed me that I'm a pretty little old black thing, right? I mean, they drilled it in. They knew what they was doing. I was just taking when I realized, man, I was 50 years old and they was dead, I said, man, I wish I could have told those people what they did for me. You know what I mean? They knew what they was doing. Because they knew what we go through. Ooh, Ethel, he's a pretty little old black thing, right? And I just took that as normal. And I remember in 1959, one of the counselors in the youth authority, he told me, he said, Reams, you're race conscious. I kind of figured out what he was talking about. But he noticed that I was a leader of the black kids all the time, and it was based on race. Well, you had Mexicans, white boys, and blacks in those days in the jails and youth authority in California. So, what I was doing was automatic. You know, and then when I think about it, when I went to a new little company cottage that had 60 boys in it, and you would have a little day room or a locker room. You sit in there for count and everything. And when I would walk in there, I got the bedroll and everything, I would have counted the people, how many blacks is in here, how many whites, da 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 da. I would do it before anything. I would just do that automatically. So then the white people realized what I was doing because they could, you know how those, they study your behavior. And they said, the white man told me in '59, hey man, before I even knew anything what he was talking about, I was still below a teenager. He was saying, you're race conscious. He was saying it like it was something bad. You know, race conscious. I had no sense to figure out today. You can turn that back on if you like. No sense of burning up. But anyway, he was saying, yeah, race conscious. So that thing of race, it carried over. And now I'm going to go into this, the special gift. See, in my family history, I had no tragedies in there. You know, I don't have any tragedies, and there's no like mooga booga stuff. You know what I mean? And but everybody in Oakland had the leader out there at that time. He actually went to jail one time. They probably took it off his record because he either shot or beat up his father-in-law because his father-in-law had, I don't know, assaulted, you know, his wife, which was the guy's daughter, which they come from that generation. That's when they did all that stuff. I didn't even hear about anything like that when I was coming up. I think we was more countrified, and it probably happened, but I didn't hear about that until modern times. You know, and I was getting around, sneaking in the houses. I was aware of my environment. But those are things that people didn't even talk about that much. But by the time Sister Bahia and them came up, that was their work. Sister Bahia's work was working with abused children. She worked with abused children. And so when they looked at, they looked at me. I remember one time when Sakina was almost 2 years old, she slipped in the bathtub and scraped her behind. And so when she was doing the whole cycle of bathing and all that, she was halfway upstairs. So she, luckily enough, Sakina said, yeah, I scraped my butt. You know, and she started looking at it and making sure that I hadn't. And luckily, she was old enough to talk to say that she scraped her own butt in the bathtub because she worked around people that's all they did was assaulted, you know, little children, stuff like that. That's what they worked. That was their work. Because they were all government workers. They're all government workers. So they ran across all of that stuff. And then they didn't have no understanding of, well, there are certain things that a grown man wouldn't do with it, you know. But they didn't think that way. They thought if you're a man as a little child, then the people of their generation, they, you know, child abuse, they did that stuff. When I was coming up in prison, if you assaulted a little girl, the niggas would beat you to death. No, when I was in prison, if you were in jail, which you wouldn't hardly get a chance to get to jail, if you were in there for abusing a child or something, like half the people in prison are for now, you would be beat to death by the prisoners. It was one guy when I was in Tracy, DVI they call it. It was one guy that he was nervous all the time. He was a Latino brother. He had did something to a 13-year-old girl, but at that time a 13-year-old girl was not quite a child, you know. She was, and he was old enough, he could have been, he was still young himself. But he was nervous because, you know, that child thing. So when I come up, you couldn't do that. I don't care what the records say. I know what the mores, right, was for that period. That was standard across the board. This new stuff comes from Abdul Malik's generation. This child abuse and all of that stuff, sure, some of it existed way back then, but it wasn't nothing like it is now. And it's getting worse. But now you got to remember, they were so aware of it because that was their job, working for the government, and they handle abused children. So eventually they're going to be able to look and think that everybody has the ability to abuse children. And that's the way people think now. You know, they think like that. Okay, to me it's an insult, but who the hell knows that? How do they know that there's certain things that you just wouldn't do because of ethics and morals? Because they don't see nobody with no ethics and morals. They just don't. So you can't blame them for thinking this is what people do. Men do that, right? Okay. And now, we want to go through some of the psychological makeup of the people there. Zakiya, which was Abdul Malik's wife, second wife, but Zakiya had approached Abdul Malik and told Abdul Malik, would you talk to Imam Musa about marriage? You know. And he said, well, he wouldn't marry you because you've been real loose up there at Berkeley. You know Berkeley student. Now, Zakiya's mother is white, and her father was probably the blackest man in the world, you know. Okay, so that's why when I refer to her all the time as Halle Berry. She actually looks like what she used to. I don't know what they mentioned it all. Now she's bigger and she's just that. I don't know. But I didn't mess with her because for several reasons. Number one, her mother was always trying to hit on me, and everybody knew it. Her mother was about my age, maybe a little bit younger. And her mother was absolutely crazy. Let me explain. There was 3 children. There was a son, looked kind of like Zakiya. You know, mixed half. There was one daughter that was by a white man. You know how she introduced that daughter to us? This is my daughter by a rape. And the daughter's standing there. I said, this lady is crazy. Who would introduce? Her daughter's an adult. When she's introducing her maybe our daughter is 25, something like that. You know, something like that. This is my daughter by a rape. Who the hell would, her mother hitting on me after you know, that type of discussion means she don't have no sense at all. She don't have no historical or psychological or emotional connection, you know what I mean, with her children. And then, I'm not saying everybody out there had something, but everybody out there was modern. And they were modern, and they had the modern diseases. They had the modern diseases of that time, of that era. Number one, they had the school days look on everybody, because all of them were school days. It was UC Berkeley, San Francisco State. They were all that. That's their makeup. And when they looked at life, that's the way they looked at it. For instance, if Abdul Malik told Sister Zakiya, well, you had loose ethics or morals up here on campus, so that might turn the Imam off. Well, it wouldn't turn me off, because I said, oh, we throwing down. And I come from an environment where there's pimps and drug people, all of that, right? So you can't hold a girl accountable. You're a bad girl because you da-da-da-da-da. That's insanity. Your history ain't no better. In fact, it's worse than hers, right? You don't have no saint credentials, right? So what he did was, no, he wanted to marry her. So he said, oh, no, he wouldn't. And then she told me all of this, you know, herself, that no, I wanted to marry you, and da-da-da-da-da. And he told me this, that, and another. Because she was always telling me I would come out there to Oakland. She would say, I hate my husband. So, why? I would be thinking, well, why did you marry him, you know, if you hated him? But I didn't like some of the things he did with her. Number one, he wanted to be slick and be in control, so he would snap his finger and point like that, and she would hop to it. And I said, nigga, a human being,